All right, thank you everyone for your patience. We will get started now as we move forward on these slides. Let's get that back. There we go. If you are attending this webinar today, you're interested in the International Education Administrators Program in France, and we're happy to have you here. I noticed a few people on this that also attended our webinar yesterday on the German IEA program, so we're happy to see that you guys are back. As a quick note, this session is intended only for U.S. applicants wishing to go overseas. So if you are an international applicant, unfortunately this session is not eligible for you, but we're happy to see your interest in the Fulbright program. My name is Sarah Kauser, and I am an outreach and recruitment specialist, and I focus on institutional engagement. What that means is I get to work on programs like these that work with administrators as well as institutions and helping you guys internationalize your campus. So I am happy to be here and to have a direct association with these IEA programs. Today I have the privilege of being joined by Dr. Karen S. Coates, who serves as the Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Southern Mississippi and was a France IEA recipient in 2018. Karen, would you like to say hello?
Hi everyone, I'm glad you could join us.
Perfect. And you guys will be hearing from Karen a little bit later on after I get through the ins and outs and the basic overview of the program. She'll discuss her experience on the program. As a quick note, this session is being recorded, and as long as you have registered, which you would have, to be on this webinar today, you will get an email from me with a link to this as well as a link to the application online. So without further ado, we will get started. So the Fulbright program was established in 1946 to expand and strengthen the relationships between the people of the United States and the citizens of the rest of the world. This program was the brainchild of a junior senator named J. William Fulbright, and his idea was really to establish people-to-people diplomacy. So that is by and large the thread that kind of intertwines every Fulbright program that we offer, and we ask that you remember this as you are working on your application and how that goal really resonates with you and with your institution. The program is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and it is administered by the Institute of International Education's Council for International Exchange of Scholars. So we've had that relationship for over 73 years, and we're still excited to be administering these programs. In terms of Fulbright by the numbers, we like to give you a little bit of overview of what goes into the larger Fulbright program. So there's this larger Fulbright umbrella, and within that it encompasses the scholar side of the program, which you're hearing about today, as well as the student side and teachers, which are K through 12 programs. So we're getting very close to having almost 400,000 alumni. Originally the programs used to start with about 80 going every year, and we're close to sending about 8,000 a year. So you can see the program has really grown in the years that we have been administering it. On the scholar side of the program, we send about 800 U.S. scholars. That's made up of faculty and administrators like yourself. And you can see that we are active in around 160 participant countries. This does vary between the students and the scholar side. I think on the scholar side we're closer to about 130, but that does change and fluctuate year in and year out. On the right-hand side, you can see what some Fulbrighters have gone on to do. My predecessor used to say, if you were interested in getting a Pulitzer Prize, starting with a Fulbright is not a bad way to start that trajectory. So as I said, you're interested in the U.S. scholar side of the program. These programs are divided into three components. As you can see, there's only two pieces of the pie on here. That's because the collaborative research component was not actively selecting scholars in the 17-18 year, but that program is geared towards the Fulbright Arctic Initiative. So that allowed member countries who are part of the Arctic Circle to apply to do collaborative research together and in small groups as well as individual research. The U.S. Fulbright program for faculty members allows faculty members to research and or teach overseas. And then the programs that we are going to dive into a little bit further are the International Education Administrator Seminar. So we will get there right now. So the IEA Seminar program is a little different from all the other programs that we do offer, and each IEA is different from one another. So as you can see, there are 7 different awards listed on this screen. Each award has a different deadline, so all but France and Germany, those deadlines have all passed. So we are still recruiting for the 1920 academic year for only France and Germany. We always recommend that you look closely at each of the awards, and especially at the professional profile requirement listed on those pages, and I will open both of those pages towards the end of this presentation. The reason we say that is France is geared towards more senior level administrators, as you can see on this screen, while Germany is open to a broader availability. Again, we did have a webinar for Germany yesterday, and that one will go online as well early next week. So if that's something that you're more interested in, please reach out to me and I can connect you to that link. So these Fulbright IEA seminars are intended to have broad personal and professional impacts on grantees. From this experience, your home campus will benefit from increased knowledge of the host country's higher education system. It will aid in the development of programs, international student advising, and broader global collaboration. Additionally, grantees will broaden their networks with possible partnerships and cooperation through the other Fulbright IEA grantees. I know Karen will discuss this a little bit further on her experience working with other institutions. A key component for these programs is it's important for applicants to think about their application in relation to their university. This is not just a personal application, but more broadly one that aims to increase institutional internationalization. So it is a twofold application. We want you to think about how it does impact yourself, but also please do not forget how it will impact your institution, what you will be bringing back. In terms of eligibility, the key criteria is you must be a U.S. citizen. One thing that is different on these programs from the rest of the Fulbright Scholar programs is a PhD or terminal degree is not required for these programs. Many of the other faculty-driven research and lecturing programs might require a PhD or terminal degree, but for the IEAs, that is not a requirement. Additionally, each award will specify that you need the appropriate professional experience. So for Germany, they require 3 years. For France, they're requiring 5 years of experience within this field. Again, each award will have additional requirements by award, so I will show that as we get there and throughout this presentation. And one thing we like to highlight is there's always new policies that are coming up. Previously, we had a lot of questions that you were limited to 1 Fulbright throughout your career. That is no longer the case. You can have more than 1 Fulbright as long as there is a 2-year waiting period between those grants. And lastly, a question that we often get is if foreign language is required for these. All of the IEA seminars are conducted in English. So your entire 2 weeks will be fully conducted in English. So there is no language requirement for these programs. So diving deeper into the France IEA program, there are about 12 awards that will be given to this program. So when you are going overseas for those 2 weeks, you'll be with a cohort of up to 12 other U.S. administrators who will be traveling with you across France. So participants experience briefings in France, as well as campus visits, appointments with selected government officials, networking and cultural activities, and meeting with French international education professionals. The seminar concludes with a French group meeting with the group of German IEAs in a specific location, and that location does rotate throughout the year. Sometimes it's in France, sometimes it's in Germany, and you'll find out from Karen with her experience it was actually in Belgium. So that does transition every year, and they should let you know if you are awarded where it will be. The deadline is February 1st for these programs, and the grant dates will be in mid-October. Unfortunately, the French Commission has not nailed down the exact dates yet, but stay tuned to the catalog of awards online. That's where we will update it as soon as we hear. As I mentioned earlier, the French IEA program is open to senior level university administrators such as deans, vice presidents, provosts, and presidents. And these Administrators should have a substantial responsibility for enhancing the international dimensions of institutions. So upon coming back, you should have that level to where you can really enact the change and put forth these changes and innovations into action. The program is looking for applicants with a minimum of 5 years of full-time work experience within internationalization. So those are by and large the specific requirements for the France IEA. So as I said, Germany and France are still looking for applicants, so you might be wondering, how do I choose between both of these programs? So the questions we like to, or potentially you want to wait a year and apply for one of the other 5 countries that will be looking for applicants next year. So the questions you might want to ask yourself is, how has your campus been working to internationalize itself? Have you started partnerships with other institutions overseas, or are you looking to invest and start these partnerships and MOUs? Does your institution have plans to increase these cooperations in any way? Are there specific goals for you to go to France, for your institution to really break into France or really develop with those institutions over there? Additionally, you might ask, are there any institutional goals to increase the number of students from any country? Do you want to increase study abroad to France or increase receiving French international students, things like that. So you'll want to really think about what your institution is currently doing. Next, you'll want to think about your professional experience. Have you had extended professional, not personal, professional experience in France? If that's the case, this may not be the program for you, but just think about that. If it's been within the last 5 or so years, really think, what has my experience been with France? And lastly, you'll want to think about what your professional profile is. As I mentioned earlier, we do have that catalog of awards. I just mentioned it on the last slide, but you really want to make sure that you have that professional background and that length of experience to really succeed in this program and make sure you are meeting the guidelines of eligibility for this program. So you've met all the requirements, you're ready to apply. What do? We do have an online application. It's called Embark, and that hosts the form that you will find online. It is linked in the IEA landing page, as well as I will show you how to get to that. So that's step number 1, is you want to start an application. Within that, you have a couple of different attachments you have to make sure that you are submitting. It's made up of 5 parts in addition to the application form. So you have the application form, which is your biographical data. Then you will have to submit 4 other things. The first would be your statement of intent. Then you have to make sure you're submitting your CV or resume. You have to submit 3 letters of reference. And lastly, you have to submit an institutional statement, which I'll have page limits that I will now get into. So the statement of intent, I'll go into more detail on the next page, but that is 3 to 5 pages. This is also referred to in the past as your project statement. This is your opportunity to lay out your proposed project specifics in as much detail as possible. Then you have your CV or resume. That is up to 6 pages. Please do not go over any of these page limits, and all of this information is found online. We like to be as transparent as possible. Say you go over the page limits, that will not automatically throw your application out the window. We will get in touch with you and ask you to shorten it. Next, you have the letters of reference. You have to submit 3. You will not be adding them yourself, but what you will do is in the system, you will write the name and email of the person who will be writing that reference for you. As you do that, they will receive an email and they can actually submit it on their own. So you will never be able to see the reference letter. We do have a little bit of specifications on who can be these reference writers. So 1 reference must come from your current supervisor or someone you report to at your institution. The second reference must be from a colleague in your field or from either at your own or another institution, and they should be familiar with your administrative skills and leadership success. The last reference can come from any colleague who can speak to your personal attributes and interest in international education. These tend to be the qualities that we are looking for in the selection process, so it's good that each one of them really dives into a different aspect that you bring to the table. Lastly, we have your institutional statement. The institutional statement is 1 to 2 pages, and it really is talking about your institution. So what we're looking for in that is general information about your home institution, what type of institution is it? Is it a small liberal arts? Is it a minority serving institution? Is it a larger research institution? Let us know what it is. You'll additionally talk about the total number of enrollments at your institution and the number of degrees offered. We also ask that you talk about the number of international students on campus and where they're coming from. And additionally, we would like to know what are the current study abroad opportunities available on your campus. Next, in this institutional statement, what you can discuss is if you have any current partnerships in France. So does your institution currently have any of those MOUs that we were discussing earlier? Are you currently having direct placement at certain institutions for study abroad? Let us know what those partnerships are. And lastly, and not to be forgotten by any means, but what is your institution's future goals and plans to internationalize? These are kind of the key elements that we ask that you look into upon submitting your application. We do have the IEA Seminar checklist online. Again, it's straightforward. It tells you the fonts of everything, the page limits, anything you might wish to know and more. We want you to have the most successful application possible. So as I said, I was going to go a little bit more into the statement of intent just so you can work to develop that. So as we previously said, the statement of intent is your opportunity to lay out your proposed project specifics. Why are you applying to Fulbright? As I said earlier, it's to engage mutual understanding between people of the U.S. and the rest of the world. So what is it about Fulbright and this program that exactly resonate with you? Why are you interested in France? Why are you interested in getting to know these connections and what do you hope to get out of it? It's for you to focus on what you plan to do. So the program is already set. Those 2 weeks, and Karen will get into this a little bit more, but the 2 weeks are set of what institutions and organizations you are meeting with. So we're asking you to delve into that to expand what you intend to do and what you hope to mostly bring back to your institution. Additionally, you will want to discuss how adaptable you are and how well you deal with change. And in terms of, we've talked a lot about the professional side of things, but really on the personal side, please think about, in addition to how this will internationalize your campus and meet those international education goals, but how will this impact you? So that's something we never want you to forget. One thing that I like to highlight at this point is really what the review criteria is looking for. So the things that our panels look for is the suitability of the applicant's credentials, their training, knowledge, skills, and experience as it relates to international education. They're also looking for your personal qualities and your ability to serve as a cultural ambassador for the United States. This can be including but not limited to your personal attributes and your cultural adaptability and sensitivity. As we said earlier, one of your references will be talking about that in detail. So again, it's everything we ask for is with a specific reason. And lastly, we're looking for your project's potential impact and the value of your projected outcomes on your career, your professional development, your home institution, and your home community. So those are things we want to make sure that you are taking into account. One of my colleagues used to say, print off your application and start highlighting it. Look at these questions we have on the screen, and if you attach a different color to each one and you start to see that your application is colored one color more than the others, take a step back, rewrite it, and make sure you are still addressing these questions on the screen. Again, we want you to be successful. Another thing that I would recommend is that you share this with colleagues on your campus and other people within your life who can take a look at the questions we're asking and make sure that you are writing a statement that is strong and addressing all of those questions. It doesn't help to get hurt to get feedback by any means, so we definitely encourage you to do so. In terms of the review process, as we said, the application for both France and Germany is February 1st of 2019. After that, it will go into a review panel stage here in the United States. So those are previous IEA France and Germany alumni who are reviewing the proposed applications. So you will be notified in April whether or not your application was recommended or not recommended. If your application is recommended, that means it's going overseas. In your case, for this program, it will go overseas to France for the commission in France to make that final selection of who will be those 12 awardees for this program. Then you'll find out in May what the final status is, whether or not you will be going overseas to France in October. So that's the general overline of timelines that I have for you guys. With that, I'm happy to pass the reins over to Dr. Coates.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a really good overview, and I can speak to most of those points if there are questions about that along the way. I thought what I would do is just start by telling you a little bit about the experience that I had, the 2 weeks that I was in France. I'll start by saying that this is absolutely the best experience I've had in 29 years in higher ed. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I found it to be just really exciting, transformative even, and just a lot of fun and very energizing in terms of thinking about new things to do on my campus that would help us expand our international dimension. So it was extremely important to me professionally, and I've already started talking a lot to my colleagues and students and others about this program in particular, but about other things that we might do as well. So I think we will be hitting the ground running, trying to develop new ideas and get those things implemented. But what I wanted to do is tell you specifically about the things that we did. I won't go into total detail because it would take a whole lot longer than the time that we have. This was a slam-packed experience. They had it totally planned out for us, which is not to say we didn't have some downtime and some time to tour and do things on our own, but for the most part, it was very full with already pre-planned activities. I left out of my airport here on October the 5th and then I think a mid-morning flight and got into Charles de Gaulle Airport at about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I went from Paris to Montpellier. That's where they started us, and that initial city, I think, is something that changes. The bulk of the experience is in Paris, but they will start in a different city, and so it probably won't be Montpellier this next year, but there will be an additional city that you get to experience. But we started really on that Saturday evening with a tour of the historic city, and that was a lot of fun. We all were beginning to get to know each other at that point. I will say that we were a very diverse group of people. We were from all over the country, different types of institutions. We had different roles at our institutions, and so it was a fun group of people to get to know. But we started in earnest on Sunday with an overview of the French educational system for a couple of hours with our host, Arnaud Dubouvet, who is the executive director of the Franco-American Fulbright Commission, as well as Charlotte Goodwin, who helped him out. She's a program coordinator there in Paris. So we learned a lot about sort of what to expect. They told us what the French educational system is like, expectations. That's very different from the U.S. system, and so there was a lot for us to learn, and that was some time well spent. Then they took us on a tour. We went to a winery and an old chateau, and that was really interesting and a fun place to go as well. But then on Monday, we started probably 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and we were taken to the first university that we visited, which is University Paul Valéry, which is Montpellier 3. So many of the institutions are numbered, which I found quite interesting. But we learned a lot from faculty there who gave presentations to us throughout the morning, and we learned about things like their psychology products, British American Studies. They have a Nexus project called Digital Humanities, and many other research areas that they are focusing on, and we learned about what they're doing on their campuses and about opportunities for exchange or study abroad, or ways to involve American students in their programs. We went from there to the Historic School of Medicine, which was fascinating to me. I'm a microbiologist by training, and biomedical science fascinates me, so I really enjoyed this. This Historic School of Medicine is the oldest medical school in France, if not Europe, and it was built in the 12th century. So really interesting to tour, but also to hear from faculty about projects that are going on there. At the end of the day, we had a tour of their historic anatomy museum, which was fascinating to me, and an evening reception with the U.S. Consul General to Marseille, Simon Hankinson. And so the Consul General was there, and he was there on some additional excursions that we had. We broke into two groups on the next day for part of the day and toured some lab sites. They have these sites they're called Lab X sites, which are their emphasis areas for some of their most high quality research. And our groups went to different locations. My group went to a place called Vectopole, which is a place where they do mosquito rearing for vector-borne disease, viral disease transmission studies. I'm a virologist, and so that was really fascinating to me. We also went to a place called Ecotron, where they have these experimental platforms that people utilize from all over actually all over Europe can utilize these facilities. They're micro, meso, and macrocosms that are allow people to do ecology, agronomy, soil science research, those sorts of things. Really interesting to see. The other group went to biomedical research facilities, and then we got back together and we talked about what we had learned. The next day we went and took a look at the secondary school system and learned a lot about that, which is really unique, quite different from the way secondary school is done in the U.S., and that was fascinating. And we were able to go to a high school where they teach hospitality and were treated to a meal by students who cooked and served the meal to us. It was really interesting and just a unique educational system there. While we were in Montpellier, we had several guided tours. I already mentioned the Chateau and Winery, the historic Montpellier, and we also were able to visit a historic site, a Roman Catholic cathedral that's on the Mediterranean. And that's sort of how we wound up those first couple of days, actually 4 days in Montpellier. Then we took a train to Paris on a Wednesday afternoon, and we stayed in Paris from Wednesday evening through the following Wednesday, so 7 full days there. When we were in Paris, we visited several institutions. We went to Paris-Saclay, a university, and a Grandes Écoles. You'll learn about that, the Grandes Écoles system when you get there, which are for the best and brightest students. We learned about how they are reorganizing their universities, how they are consolidating many of them, and really the most up-to-date information about how their universities are organized. On the end of that very first day of touring Paris-Saclay and other areas, we were taken to Versailles, which was absolutely incredible. We started with a tour of really a historic library, the Gallery of Foreign Affairs, and we had some presentations by faculty and others there on sustainable campuses, climate, environment, those sorts of things, and actually some of our group gave some talks about sustainability on their home campuses. And then we were taken through the Chateau, Versailles, with an almost private tour. It was really incredible. We were guided by the scientific director of research at the Chateau, and so he had more information than anyone could possibly gather. It was really an amazing experience. From there, over the next several days, we went to other universities. We met with French university vice presidents. We had guided tours of the original sort of housing area where countries from all across the world have built houses that represent their countries on this beautiful park-like setting. So that was fascinating to see. We went to the University Paris Diderot, looked at the future medical school. We learned about campus life and cultural affairs, things like that. We had research site visits. I was able to go to the Institute of Jacques Monod, which again was fascinating for me as a microbiologist, because that Jacques Monod was a Nobel Prize winning microbiologist. Our other group went to the Centre de Ressources en Langue. I said that terribly, but that's a language institute, and they thoroughly enjoyed what they saw as well. went on to learn about economic cooperation and development at a research facility in France as well, outside of Paris as well, where we learned about assessment of adult competencies, assessment of student assessment metrics, and projects for higher and teacher education. So we got a lot of data at that particular meeting. Several different individuals gave us slide presentations, and we learned a lot. It was really very interesting. On the weekend, we were treated to a guided tour of a farmer's market with food and wine tasting. We had free afternoons for sightseeing, walking tours led by Arnaud, who was wonderful. He is from Paris, and everywhere he went, he was telling us what we were seeing. We were really, it was such a treat to just walk around Paris with him. At the end of our time in Paris, we took a train to Brussels, and that's where we wound everything up. We spent about 2.5 days in Brussels. We met jointly with the German group there, and we had debriefings with them where we learned what they did. They learned what we did. We had a reception at the U.S. Embassy, which celebrated 70 years of the Franco-American Fulbright program there in Brussels. And we also met with the Academy for Higher Education there and learned about higher ed in Belgium, and again, opportunities for just exchange, the Erasmus program, internationalization, things like that you'll hear about. A little bit of free time to tour Brussels, which was fascinating, and then a farewell dinner, and headed home on that Saturday. That was the third Saturday. That was the 21st of October. The time flew by, and it was just an incredible experience. And I'll stop there with that and take questions, or Sarah can jump in if you'd like, and just direct this conversation where you'd like it to go from here.
Great. That is wonderful insight that we have from you. We actually just have one more slide, and then we can jump into questions. So the last slide that I just want to get across to everyone is we do really like transparency here on the program. So we do have application resources, and as we're waiting for questions, I can walk through those areas on the website. These slides will be provided online when the recording is, and so all of these links will be clickable at that time. But please note that the application is found online, have clear application instructions and guidelines that you can find. In terms of the Learn section, you're already on this webinar, so that's a great first step. We also have the blog, so we try and have recent alumni from each of these programs post about their experience, so feel free to reach out there. But you've also just heard about it from Karen, which is probably the best resource you could have, is hearing straight from one of our alumni. And then lastly, we do have My Fulbright. That's an online database for you to register your interest in the IEAs, as well as within to register your interest in France specifically. So that is key in case maybe you don't intend to apply right away. Maybe you want to wait a year or two before applying. That way you can make sure that you are hearing from us as you become more interested in submitting that application. And so the last slide that I have, and we'll go into questions, is you can find my contact email on this slide. So it's iea@iie.org. Just so you know, please let me know when you are asking a question to specify whether or not you're applying for France or Germany. That way I can direct your questions appropriately, since both applications are currently live and we're looking to fill both of those application deadlines. So with that, I will transition to the question portion. So the first question, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, Karen, is how do you define a senior level administrator? So we went over that on the slides, but can you actually kind of go into maybe the different backgrounds and profiles that you came across on the France program?
Absolutely. That's a great question, because I was initially a little bit intimidated by that. I will say that, and I mentioned this to Sarah earlier, is that a couple of years ago I considered applying for the France program and decided to wait because I didn't feel like I had enough years in not my present job necessarily, but combined. I actually was able, the time that got me past the 5 years was my previous position where I was Associate Dean of the Graduate School at another institution, and then I moved over to this institution and was able to, those times cobbled together gave me the additional time. So you do need that 5 years, but you don't necessarily have to be a dean or above. What was interesting is that there was kind of a wide range of ages among the group as well. Probably the youngest person in the group was in her, I would say, late 30s, and she was a director of international studies for her institution. So a young person at that director level. There were other individuals who were in provost offices but were not necessarily the provost. They may have been an assistant provost or an associate provost. There were people who held the role of international in their title. I don't have international in my title, and that was one of the things that I checked on before I bothered to apply, because I wanted to make sure that because I'm not a dean of international or a VP for international or something like that, if I would be excluded. But no, in fact, if you work with international students, you just have to make it clear in the application how you do that, whether or not you have international in your title. But senior level administrator, I believe if you are, I would say, above the level of a department chair, or you're broadly your title fits into a higher administration office, but you might not necessarily be that top person in the office. It's worth checking. You might not be where you need to be yet, but it's worth checking. So don't hesitate to call or email Sarah or others to find out if you would be considered.
Great. I could not have said that better myself, to be honest. So one thing, we did just get a question, and I want to be very enthusiastic about is, should you start the application now? Yes, by all means, please start now. That now leads me to the website portion that you should be seeing now on your screen. So this is the IEA landing page. You can get to it by going to CIES.org and just do a /IEA, or on our homepage, you can go under Programs, U.S. Scholars, IEA Seminars to get there. So on this landing page, this has everything you could ever want to know about the program. It goes over eligibility, which we talked about, as well as the application materials. So those application guidelines I was mentioning, you can find here. The review criteria that the panelists will be looking at is here. And then if you want to start that application right now, you just click IEA Application Login, and then there's this Embark application. When you click that, you'll be taken to a landing page where you can register, or if you've already applied in the past and are applying again, just log in using those details as well. So that's how you do get to the application, and I hope you do start your application now. In terms of, we do have a question about sleeping accommodations for the participant. Having not gone on it myself, Karen, do you mind talking about that?
Oh, it was great. We were in very nice hotels. We were not in extravagant hotels, but we were in very nice hotels. And everybody had their own room. Perfect.
Perfect. And that actually reminds me to show everyone the catalog of awards, which is awards, on the screen, awards.cis.org. That's how you get to our catalog of awards to start looking at the requirements. You'll want to click search only the open awards. And for this program, you're interested in France. Going off of those accommodations, the first page is really the overview, the requirements that say kind of the level you should be at, as well as how much time, being 5 years, that's listed here. But the awards benefits, what it includes, just for your knowledge, is the award includes round-trip travel within France, lodging, and a lump sum supplement for incidental. So that is what you will receive. It's a fully paid program. So the next question that we have is, does my institution need an MOU with a university in France in order for me to apply for the IEA? It does not, but if you do already have those MOUs in place, we would like to know what they are so that they are aware of your current involvement. Karen, do you have anything you would like to add to that about current professional relationships with institutions in France?
Well, you know, here we do have a lot of study abroad and exchange opportunities that our students participate in, undergraduate and graduate. But in terms of institutional partnerships with French universities or agencies, I really just had about 3 bullet points, 3 things that I was able to identify. Some exchange agreements, which I identified. We have an unusual, that is unique to our institution, but we have a center that is directly involved with Interpol, which I mentioned. And then we had a professor who has some direct contact, well, collaborative work research that's ongoing in France. And so those were I'm sure there are a lot of institutions with a lot more direct institutional partnerships than we had, and mine was successful.
Great, great. Should at least one of the references come from someone outside of my current institution? It is not a requirement, but you are allowed for one of them. Since one has to come from your supervisor, one will come from someone within your department that can speak to your abilities. That person can either be at your institution or not. And the third one is more about your personal attributes. Karen, do you want to talk about who you might have asked for references from?
Sure. A person that I directly report to is the provost. So he wrote a letter for me. Our VP for research, who is very familiar with the projects that I have done here in my role as dean, as well as he's also very familiar with the research area because we're both microbiologists, and so I had him write one. And then the dean at my former institution, the person that I used to work directly for, wrote a letter for me. I will say this, I think this is important, and it gets back to this idea of getting started pretty early, is that all of them wanted to see my statements that I had written, my institutional statement as well as the personal statement or the intent statement, because it helps them shape the letter. And so it would be good, you don't have to have it necessarily complete, but to have a draft at least that they can take a look at is very helpful.
Great, great. We've gotten a few questions about if we can disclose the number of applications that we have had. Unfortunately, that's something that we cannot disclose. By and large, that's a rule kind of across the board. So Fulbrights tend to be competitive. However, please don't let that discourage you from applying. If you feel you are a competitive applicant for this and that this really aligns with your background, we want you to apply. We don't want you to be deterred by wondering if there are other more eligible applicants out there. Please, please apply. And that does lead into something that I always offer is if you are going to email us questioning your eligibility, please attach your current CV or your most recent CV. That way I can actually look at your background, see what it says, and let you know if you are eligible or be able to advise you better during an advising session. One question that I got, which I really enjoy, is do the selection panels intentionally select people with different backgrounds, like microbiology, business, etc.? I really do like this question. We are looking for a diverse range of applicants to move forward. With that, as I said, there are 2 panels. The first panel is done within the United States, and that's to either recommend or not recommend an applicant to move forward. If you are not recommend, we're happy to set up time to work with you to maybe make your application stronger in the future. We don't ever want to deter you, but it just meant that within this cycle, they didn't feel you were at that level yet. Emphasis on yet. They always want people to come and apply again. It might take 2 or 3 times to get it to work, just depending. And again, that's the other reason we don't disclose numbers. It's just really depending on how strong each cohort is and who's applying. It just really changes. So in terms of selecting different backgrounds, they are looking for people from a diverse audience, so a diverse background, as well as diverse institutions, as well as diverse areas within those institutions. Karen, I know you did discuss this a little bit, but did you feel that there were other current applicants from unique fields on your cohort?
Well, I would just say that there were a lot of different areas of expertise. There were people, I mean, as I've already said, I'm a microbiologist. There were a couple of people who were engineers. There was a musicologist. There were people from social work, some different types of the social sciences. And I'm thinking in terms of the people who were faculty who had moved into administrative positions. There were a couple of people who were non-faculty whose job was really staff in those offices, like director of international studies or whatever. That particular individual did not have a PhD, and that was the job that she did. She did not move up through the academic ranks. So it's really quite diverse. And as I said, a lot of different sizes and types of institutions as well.
Perfect. We do have a question about the time frame of the programs. The states aren't listed. The programs for Germany and France are always around mid-October, but feel free to email me that, and I'll save you to my inbox, and the minute I get those dates, I will forward it to you. I'm happy to do so, but it tends to be mid-October. That's what you have experienced as well, right, Karen?
That ours was the 6th through the 21st of October.
There we go. Perfect. Let's see. We do have a question. They want us to speak a little bit more about the second panel that happens in France, and I am happy to do so. I have never sat in on those panels, but essentially once we're done in the U.S., all of the applications that are recommended go overseas to the commission. They similarly will put together a panel, a kind of cohort to review each of the applications that was recommended, and at that point they're really looking to build the cohort. They're looking to diversify and make sure that they're building a cohort that will really mesh well together with those various backgrounds and things like that. So they make that final selection having run the program. They actually know kind of who is the best fit each year that they're going into this. I hope that is enough information that I can provide to you today. We have a question. I was the chair of the Global Measures team with Whirlpool for 2 years and have been the Dean of Social Science for 3 years. I would ask if you can please email me directly with that CV, and the two of us can set up a time to speak over the phone to really go over your experience and make sure that you are eligible. But I would love to speak with you directly. Thank you for emailing that. All right. Here's a decent question. I think, Karen, you might have some insight in. One way our institution is internationalizing is through tours of industries abroad and student internships abroad. Would an IEA be a good way to develop connections to grow those types of programs? Karen, do you have thoughts on that?
I think so. I think it's definitely worth looking at. We met with a lot of different types of people when we were there. Some of them were higher ed officials. Most of them were. But there were opportunities, I think, to see the kinds of research that goes on at the institutions, as well as at the universities, as well as research institutions. And I think just a lot of contacts to be made. So I would, yes, I think it is definitely worth time to do that. I mean, it was just very informative. There was so much to learn while I was there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The last question that I have pending is if we can share the major differences in selection requirements with the German program. I will offer my insight, and I know Karen can offer some of her insight from what she saw between the different cohorts. But essentially with the Germany program, they're looking for a broader range of applicants. So those applicants do not necessarily have to be senior international officers on their campus and administrators. They can come from fields such as study abroad advisors, international student advisors, career services, admissions, things like that. So they're looking for a broader scope in terms of applications. And with them, they are looking for a 3-year requirement in terms of experience, as opposed to the 5 years of requirements the French program is looking for. Karen, did you kind of notice anything when you did meet up with that cohort of the Germany IEAs?
Right. We didn't spend a lot of time with them to get to know them that well, but I will say that that broadly is true. I think that they were younger in their careers, many of them, and they were, they represented the sorts of offices that you just described largely.
Perfect. The last question that we have, we just got another one, sorry, is if we can talk a little bit more about the institutional statement. Karen, do you want to provide maybe some background on what you had included in that?
Sure. Okay. Well, first I would say this: make use of the resources on your campus. I contacted she's an associate vice president for institutional research, and got data from her. And also I talked directly with our associate provost for international education to get more direct information than I had, because in my role I don't work with those data specifically. So I spent, you've got 2 pages to do this in. I talked generally about my institution. I described my institution. We have multiple campuses. I talked a little bit about that. I talked about demographics of the campus, those sorts of things. And then I talked, again, with the international student enrollment. I specifically mentioned, and I was using spring 2018 data because that was the most freshest data. It was the freshest data that I had at the time when I was writing it. And I used spring 2018 data on international enrollment. I gave the number, and then I listed the countries that they came from with the number of students from each country. And that's really what I did with that. Study abroad opportunities really was just a list. Here's the institution we're engaged with internationally, and that includes all across the world, not just France in that particular question. And then institutional partnerships is where you, with French universities, is where you specifically talk about the French universities. And again, for me, that was just a list of what those are and what goes on with those. And then with future goals and plans for internationalizing, I just came up with very specific ideas that I talked about. That is something that I would say is very important in both this section as well as the statement of intent. Come with very detailed, specific ideas. Don't, you can talk broadly to some extent, but I think you need to have some real firm ideas, not things that are developed yet necessarily, but just ideas about what you want to do with your campus and how this impacts it, and specifically the things that you are involved in. I think the more detailed, I don't want to say overly detailed, but the more specific that you can be, I think is really adds value, because I think it shows that there's some real intentionality there and not just nebulous ideas.
Perfect. You answered the last question, and we have 6 minutes to spare. Thank you so much, Karen, for making the time to be on the call. I know you're very busy on campus, but we really appreciate having your insights and really bringing that experience to this webinar. We couldn't do this without you. And again, thank you to everyone else who has been on this call. We know you're also busy on campus. But we do hope to start seeing inquiries from you in the inbox and see applications getting started. But if you have any questions, my email again is on the screen. Please reach out, and we're happy to work with you. And we can't wait to see more applications come in. But I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season and a good afternoon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.